It's interesting how I ended up in the drone business. You tend to think of drones. Can you turn me down just a little bit? Drones as, either attack vehicles or kids' things, right? Our present drone, to get the whole package all together was $4,300. And to get a computer that can run it was $4,800. We have moved from the realm of toys into the realm of big world, but it's taken all of that to do what you're going to see in the next few minutes. I wasn't that interested in drones, but I saw a friend of mine who had been on a mission trip in Thailand, and I watched him fly the drone over the top of the jungles, only to suddenly see the golden top of a Buddhist wat or temple, and I shining in the sun, and I said, those things are cool. and we started talking about it. I said, yeah, you can fly it up the canyons. You can fly it up a canyon? I started thinking, wow. Well, anyways, that still wasn't it. Oh, this is the wrong one. That wasn't what really convinced me. It was after, cancel that. Just excuse me, I just found I have the second part up and I have to get the first part up. So let me get that up. There we go. Go. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Anyways, it was when I started discovering the glacial Lake Missoula flood, which I'll explain in just a minute. One of the things that Michael Ord from Bozeman, who'd really written the book on it, the creationist version, was these water ripples, giant water ripples, up on the side of the mountain about an hour out of Missoula. And so I looked at his book and I go, what is that? I mean, it just didn't look like anything. And so I thought, well, let's try getting a drone out there. And when I saw what the drone could show you and show me, it suddenly became a magnificent tool. So I call this one Doc's Drone Says Otherwise. There is sound, but I don't think it's going to come through. Maybe it will. If it will, it'll come through maybe this TV, which we won't worry about it. It's just music. So I want to show you this little video clip. Oh, you can hear it. Now, the Daily Beast obviously is an antagonistic to Christianity group, but the first one, Biologos, logos being the word, bio being biology, they're the ones who say this is a Christian organization, the scientific and historical evidence is now clear. There has never been a global flood that covered the entire earth. By the way, I offered to send this information or come and present it to them. You know what their answer was? No answer. Ignore you. I'm going to tell you, my drone says otherwise. Now, what is the issue here? And the issue is very simply deep time versus a young earth. Did you get that? If Noah's flood was real, the earth is young. If Noah's flood was some local flood, the earth is old. That's really how you can cut through all the issues. So the issue is deep time, millions and billions of years of Earth history, or a young Earth. So do you see the little bracket up there? Can you see that with a little A by it? That's hypothetical. But just say we take a chunk of those layers. And by a deep time, we're going to say hypothetically, that might represent 3 million years. You see that? It took 3 million years to put those layers down. In a young Earth point of view, maybe 1 week of flood surge. Huge difference, same data. Do you see that? It's just how you're going to interpret. Now, here's the point. If you believe the Bible is trustworthy and the flood of Noah was an actual event, then those layers originated in the flood of Noah. And for a lot of people, that's kind of like a, whoa, moment. Never thought of it that way. That is the way it is. So in other words, when you're taking the hike down into the millions of years into the Grand Canyon, you're actually taking the hike down into weeks of the flood. You see that? Flood surges. So I showed you this, and I asked you how many years it would take to cut the canyon. What's the answer? 3 days. And that was by the Lake Missoula flood. Now, I took that picture like this. Then I turned 90 degrees and I took this next picture. It's a beautiful falls, isn't it? That's Palouse Falls. It's Palouse Falls State Park in the middle of nowhere, Washington. You can't get there if you're trying to go anywhere. You have to go there intentionally. But, you know, after I'd been there and I was reviewing the photographs, I noticed that thing. And I thought, that's a weird looking little thing, like a little comb or something out there. And I moved in closer, and then I looked at those little projections on top, and I thought, how many millions of years do you think those things would last? I mean, you're talking about rain, ice, snow, expansion, contraction. How many? That wouldn't last 1 million years. That wouldn't last 100,000 years. And the Lake Missoula flood was somewhere around 4,000 years ago, 3,900, somewhere in there. So let's talk about the Lake Missoula flood. But before we do, survey, how many have heard of it other than from me before today? Oh, good number of you. Okay, good. The rest of you, here we go. And if you didn't get a handout, make sure you get one so you can take it home and kind of review it. The flood was discovered by this guy, J. Harlan Bretz, and he was a school teacher in Seattle, Washington. And he actually taught geomorphology, so to speak, in the sense of how the topography of the landscape was formed. And around 1915, 1916, he received some of the first copies of the topographical maps of Washington State. They'd never had them before. And here's one of them that he almost certainly received. And what you notice is a lot of flat farmland, like fairly close to the Red River Valley kind of farmland. And then all of a sudden, do you see that big tear-up area where the lines get really close? And we're going to fly over this, by the way, and this is called the Potholes Coulee. And that's an amazing thing that he discovered, along with one more thing, among others. He discovered a 3-mile wide waterfall in a desert with no water. There's no waterfall. There's water down below, but there's no water flowing on this thing. And there's deep plunge pools from the water, and that's what those lakes are. Do you see that little white speck along the shore? That's a boat, to give you a perspective of the size. And then I noticed that thing out there. It's kind of like a little island or peninsula out there. And I went down and looked at it, and it's big. It's hundreds of feet high. And so anyways, Brett started writing his reports up, and he realized that there was some massive flood that came across Washington State. He did not know where the water came from, other than it came from somewhere beyond Spokane, somewhere east of Spokane. He was studying what it did, not where it came from. And he started writing this up, and the Geological Society of Washington, D.C. convened a special meeting to deal with Brett's. And Brett's comments about this meeting, he felt like he was the young boy, the apprentice, being taken to task by the elders of the geological community, who told them that what he was writing about this massive flood was totally wrong. It was millions of years to cut that. None of them had ever set foot in Washington State. But they knew he was wrong. Not because of the evidence, but what? Presupposition. Let me show you that's true. It was even said by this. What Brett's proposed was, can you read the words? What's wrong with that? It's not allowed, apparently. Now, at this meeting was another young geologist from a place called Missoula, Montana. I've heard of it. Brett's apparently and supposedly turned over to somebody next to him and said, see Party turned over to somebody next to him, and he said, I think I know where Brett's water came from. You see, Brett's didn't know, and he didn't really care. He knew it came from Spokane. He didn't know what it was. Pardee knew. You know how he knew? Because I took this picture with my cell phone back when the cameras were just coming out. But it was a perfect day. I was at a stoplight in Missoula, and I'm looking up at Mount Sentinel. You see the lines on the mountain? That's the lake going higher and higher and higher and higher. And every year when the spring rains come, it's all dammed up at the Idaho-Montana line by an iceberg that came down from Canada and slammed into the mountain, covering Sandpoint, Idaho, and dug out Lake Pend Oreille. Anyways, that lake is going higher and higher and higher, and the prevailing winds come across that lake and then put lap lines on the mountain, dig those lines in. Next year it goes higher. Next year it goes higher. Eventually it goes 950 feet above Missoula. At the Montana line, there's 2,000 feet of water. And here's Mount Jumbo. There's Mount Sentinel. There's Mount Jumbo. I took this one fall. You can see multiple. This is a better view of it. This is from the University of Montana campus. You can see the lines on the mountain. All right. That's enough for a second. We're going to take a rabbit trail. That's important. My son works down in L.A. What do you want to say about that? That's okay. He's trying to move out of there, but he married a girl from there, so I don't know if it's ever going to happen. Anyways, one winter we went down because he had a secondary house in Mexico. This is pre-COVID, and it's right about where that arrow is pointing if you went onto the Baja California coast. And he said to me, "Dad, I want to tell you something weird about this place." He said, "When it's high tide, the water's right on shore. But when it's low tide, it's a mile that you can walk straight out into the ocean. A mile, and there's all these sea creatures in the sand. And here's what it looks like. And as the water retreats, what's it leave? Little water ripples. You can tear them up, rip them up, and then when the tide comes in and goes out, they rebuilds them every time. All right. Pardee saw the lines on the mountain, but he saw something else. And I'm taking you out to now Camas Prairie, Montana. Has anybody heard of Camas Prairie? A couple of you, all right. Probably for me, right? No, we're somewhere. You read Ord's book, maybe. Oh. Here it is. Here it is, Camas Prairie, Montana. Isn't that exciting? That is really nothing, really. There's some trees there I just want to make as a marker. And there you see the giant 45-foot-high water ripples. Can you see them? Not much, right? That's because we're looking at it this way. Look at it from above. Those are 45 feet high, just like one of those what do you call them? I don't know. Yeah, washboards. And there's a road right there to give you size. And reminding you now, there's the trees that I told you to remember, but we were looking from way over off the screen. And as you look at these ripples, you can actually tell the water went two directions because the water will go perpendicular to the ripples. And so one is going off 45-degree angles from this one. This is the one that's 45-degree angles, and the other one goes slightly farther south. And I'm going to show you an example. Here's now a still picture. You can really see it, how the water goes different directions. And you can tell by looking at the ripples. That'll become important. Okay, now what happened? Well, during the Ice Age, how many Ice Ages were there? One Ice Age. That's interesting. And if you can see the ice dam there, right there is the Idaho-Montana line. That's the Idaho Panhandle area. And Sandpoint, Idaho is right in the middle of that ice lobe that slid down from Canada. You can see glacial Lake Missoula behind it. And glacial Lake Missoula has more water than Lakes Erie and Ontario put together. So this is a massive amount of water getting impounded behind that there. And so Pardee, he knew about the water ripples. So he knew there was something that suddenly released water, and he knew it was impounded around Missoula and that area because he saw the lines on the mountain. And what we've discovered is that the dam did break. The dam was right there on the really kind of almost the whole panhandle of Idaho. And when it burst, the water went out through Spokane and then kind of spread out in a fan across Washington State. If you've never looked at Washington State from Google Earth, do it. You can still see where the water went today. Go right on Google Earth. You can follow it all over the place. There's Palouse Falls where I took that picture, and that canyon that was cut. Another important thing is the Wallua Gap. Right there, there's a place where the river got narrow, so narrow it's only 1.2 miles across, but the water couldn't go up it. It's too narrow for all the water. It's coming out at such a rapid rate, it backed up into Yakima, into the, well, really Sunnyside, Washington area, and backed up there and made a temporary lake called Lake Lewis. Then it went out through the Columbia Gorge, and then it got to Portland area, and it couldn't get out to sea fast enough, so it went back up the Willamette Valley of Oregon all the way to Eugene, dropping boulders on icebergs all over the valley of in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And those boulders came from Montana and Idaho. All right, here we are. This is one of the things I observed. This is near Spokane, a town of Sprague. And notice that there's water channels left behind. And then you see these kind of flat top structures. What do you call those here? Do they look like buttes? They look a lot like a butte, but a little one. These are only 75 feet high. And notice they have a sheer cliff. And then they have this kind of shoulder that goes down about 45 degrees. Some of it's covered with rocks that have fallen down, flat top, water channels trying to break through. And then the main channel of the water went around these as the water level lowered, and it went out there. And so looking back at these, you can see, wow, maybe this could explain how North Dakota gets buttes. I've always wondered that when I grew up here. Where did those things come from? And these have straight cliffs, and then they have this shoulder that goes down at anywhere from 30 to 60 degrees. And so I'm going to fly another area. You can see another one of those little flat tops coming into play, but also notice the water channels. That's really important to see the water channels, because that's going to show itself in a couple of places in the future, very important. Coming into view is something that's very important for the scablands, and this is called the pothole lakes. They're these nearly round circular lakes with these, looks like somebody took a router bit, a curved router bit, 45-degree angle bit, and went around the lake shore. See that? Isn't that something? And that's just like, and they're all over the scablands, all over the scablands. And there is the scablands of Washington State. Most people have never seen it because the roads go around it. Try to go where it's not, because it's wasteland. It's used by sheep mostly. All right, so what have we got so far? We have these butte-like shapes with flat tops. They have 90-degree cliffs, and then they have these 30 to 60-degree shoulders coming down off of them red arrows. And we also have the water channels. That's important. And we see this one. There's some of them where we see not only water channels, they're flat top, but some of them point the direction of the water flow. That one that I looked at below the falls was pointing the direction the water flowed. All right, so pothole lakes is a characteristic of massive floods. And they have this oval to round shape. They have these strange banks that are 45 degrees, and it varies from 30 to 60 degrees. And they were caused by turbulent whirlpools. These are massive, destructive, turbulent whirlpools that cut through solid rock. This is not something like you see on the edge of a river. It is, but it's much bigger, much more massive. Going out closer to Seattle, the direction towards Seattle, the Columbia Gorge is right there on the skyline. This is Frenchman Coulee. Notice how flat it is. And then you have the cliffs. Then you have the shoulder. There's some talus or rock that fell on top of it, but there's a shoulder there. Look at that little thing. Looks like a little cathedral sitting there. This cliff is about 400 feet. The total top to bottom is almost 600 feet. That's been cut out. And there's another important thing. That's going to be called an erosional remnant. It's something where it got left behind. The water left it there. And then, this is very important, a hanging canyon. A hanging canyon. The water was starting to come both ways, but the small one on top didn't have enough flow. The bigger one overtook it, and never did the small one erode down. So it left it hanging. You see that? That makes sense? All right. And there's some guy running his drone out there. I don't know who he is. All right, so another thing we see is these flat bottom stream beds with 90-degree cliffs and 45-degree angle shoulders. And then we see hanging canyons. And these hanging canyons are diagnostic of a flood. There's almost no other way to make them. Now, think about this, though. This one, the top end gets cut off, so the bottom of it is washed away. But what if you had water flowing down like this and it cut through the top end? Then you'd have the bottom end left behind, right? Just remember that. We're going to see a lot of that. All right, so I told you about that big Potholes Coulee. Look at the flat farmland, and then here's Potholes Coulee in the middle of farmland. Look at that thing. It's all torn up. This is from the Lake Missoula flood. That's all basalt or lava flows from Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier, and probably more. Flying over this, I spotted something about 2 years ago, after the fact. That's how it always seems to happen. And I spotted, well, look at that. There's a lake, but look at, you can see the edge of it. It's 45-degree angle. And then it cuts a channel out, and the channel goes all the way out to the falls. So it cuts a channel. So I went out 2 weeks ago, just for you, the first ones to see this. There's that lake. And there's two more I didn't even know were there. Those are pothole lakes, rounded, not as deep as the one farthest on the right. Notice the channels. They kind of converge and then go out through that one waterfall. And so I flew this 2 weeks ago, and I want to tell you there is poison ivy there. My body told me about that later. So continuing flying past that, there's the waterfall going over, and you see a huge plunge pool lake called Dusty Lake now. And it went way past that sandbar and brought dirt back and made a huge sandbar that's about 75 feet high. And the angle is 45. Look at that thing. That is a huge erosional remnant pointing the direction of flow. And look, there's water channel trying to break through. It doesn't completely cut it off. You have those same angles we've learned to see, flat on top, the same level approximately as the land across there. Everything else has been washed away. This is new. I thought I'd film across the top. It looks like the spine of something, of a dinosaur or something in the dirt. Remember that. We're going to see that again, but not from the Lake Missoula flood. So this was all cut out by the glacial Lake Missoula flood. There's another way it's trying to cut through, and we're going to take one quick look back up that spine. And these cliffs are about 500 to 600 feet down from top to bottom. I also went out and I flew this, and look what I also see here. Up on top of that, potholes without the lakes. There's a pothole. There must have been a turbulent whirlpool. And there's another one that was kind of on the edge. That one's interesting. Do you see what's interesting about it? It's like we had a bigger one and a smaller one kind of working together and left like a shape of a bowl or something inside of the whirlpool, cut by turbulent water on the edge of an erosional remnant. Where do you find these? On the edge of an erosional remnant. And so there it is there. And continuing on across that to the other side of that remnant, you see the other plunge pool from the other side. And these are called the ancient lakes. They're fairly round. We see that 45-degree angle in this sand and all of this right here. We had a major waterfall, 400-footer there. And it's just, notice the flat farmland up above. That's important to note too, because that was also created by the Lake Missoula flood, the flat farmland. And there's a nice, look, it's about 45-degree angles there. Where I pointed there, that trail coming down is about 60 degrees. And I went down there last week. This is where I got the poison ivy 2 weeks ago. And that's about 60 degrees there. Okay, what do we observe? We see planation surfaces. And I'll explain that in the next half, but that's from, in a few minutes here, but that's from the water rushing off in one big rolling planer that's cutting down the landscape. It's rolling and cutting it down. And then we have canyons down below. we have long erosional remnants, ERs, pointing in the direction of the water flow. And that's like this guy right here looking down it. And there's that spine of it again, just to remind you of that. Then we see deep plunge pools below the rim, and then we see a flat bottom creek flowing out. We also discovered vortex channels coming from a vortex lake or a pothole lake, cut by a vortex, and then the vortex kind of spins out, catches this other canal, and cuts through the solid rock. And there's what it looked like from above. And you can see that this was vortex cut lakes. There's the channel coming out from that way, and then those lakes are all feeding in, and they feed out that way. Now I'll take you out to the Wallua Gap. That's 1.2 miles across there. And as I was flying there, I noticed that little thing. It's not little. It's big. This is a big area, big country. Look at that. What does that look like? Some smokestacks, doesn't it? And notice how rounded it is, but it's fairly flat on top. I mean, in terms of height, same height, but they're rounded. And then you have that 45-degree angle shoulder, but this shoulder is really big. It's a big shoulder. And you can see a foot trail going up there. I've been up there. And it's very interesting countryside. And there's another view of it. You notice how it looks like it's almost like pipes stuck on there, because I think they've been rounded by some of the water swirling around them. That's my best guess on it. And there is the Columbia River passing through the Wallua Gap. Notice the shoulders, and also it's important to notice that there's water channels down below that cut around it. Okay? So cones and towers. So we have a tower kind of on top of a cone. All right? And my hypothesis has been that that's caused by turbulent whirlpools too. That would give us that 45-degree angle as that whirlpool, and then as it's dropping, it was cutting around this. That's a guess on my part. That would also might explain the rounded nature of those pipes on top. And there I am for scale. You see me down there? Going, where? Okay, well, how do these things form? Planation surface. When that thing burst, it spread out and it was a sheet flowing across the land, and it's cutting it down like a planer. So you take rough cut boards, you can do it that way, or you put them in these machines, and you get a flattened board. And that's what's happening to the landscape. Now think about that. It's going all across that area of potholes coulee, and it's making it all flat. Remember that erosional remnant? It was about the same level as the land over there. So that's when that got cut flat. And then it cuts down around it, leaving that behind, and so it has a flat top. Oh, so how did the buttes get out here in western North Dakota? Water was on the top level first, and then it started to channelize around it, and it cut around it and left the tops flat. You will see a 45-degree angle shoulder on a lot of them too. So that's from the sheet flow phase. But then the water starts to get lower and it channelizes, but there's sufficient flow to plane the lower surface, and that gives us that lower surface. So we have flat top erosional remnants, and that's by doing what I said. It cuts the whole area flat, and then it channelizes and leaves that behind with a flat top. Pothole lakes are by the channelized phase by turbulent whirlpools. And hanging canyons, one canyon grabs the flow. And you think about water, it kind of has a pull to it. So if water starts flowing this way, it might dry up this channel, and then it just cuts the next one lower. So there we go, is the Lake Missoula flood. And you are now experts. Everybody need to have a brain freeze or thaw or something? You doing okay? All right. Now, we're going to do something different. We're going to go beyond the Lake Missoula flood to a whole nother area. Now, think about this. This is Tass Walker from Australia. Michael Ord lent me this diagram. But Tass put it together, and I know Dr. Clary and others have already talked about the fact that about day 150 was the peak of the flood. So in this earlier stage, that's the destruction phase. And most of the sediment layers are being laid down there. There's a little bit afterwards. And that's what the Tejas, is that right? Look at that, I got it, huh? I passed the test. All right. So that's in that first 150 days. So in the first 40, 60 days, everything's getting destroyed all the way up, and then flood surges are laying down rock layers throughout the earth. This is all going on through this whole period of time, and then it starts to retreat. Now, remember, the mountaintops aren't visible for quite a while yet, 75 days. And so water is starting to roll off, but it's all underwater. And so it's eroding under the oceans yet. And so that's where we're starting to get the planation surfaces. So sheet flows cutting everything down to a uniform flattened surface. So we see the flat tops of buttes. And then finally, we get the channelized phase, and that's where it starts to give us channels like this. This is from Lake Missoula flood, and you can see we build our roads down the bottom. So we never see the tops of this. But that's where we build our roads. We just see those cliffs, but look at how flat that is. That was cut by Lake Missoula during the channelized phase. Water volume drops, and it begins to cut channels. All right. Now I'm going to take you out and show you some planation surfaces. These were cut by the earlier stages, all right? So here's the Madison River Valley in Montana, right near Bozeman. And look how flat that is. Very flat. And if you look over to the left, you're starting to see it's not so flat. And this is not straight cliff here. It kind of goes into a badland, so it must have been softer material because it just kind of roads it into a canyon-like structure. And then as it roads down off the lip of this, you can see the water just kind of roding off as the water's getting lower and lower. It goes down into the bottomland, and look how flat that is. And if you look way off in the distance, right there, you can see another level that's flat. There's a butte, and so this is what it looks like. That's dramatic, isn't it? But this is a good example of what planation surfaces look like. Madison River Valley. We have a semi-flat river valley below that as well. This is Chugwater Creek, Wyoming, 6,000 feet. And look at that little creek that cut that big valley. Do you see what I'm saying? You see, that creek didn't cut that valley. The valley cut the creek. The valley cut it out, and the creek just follows. And here's a mistake I made. I used to think those were water ripples. I don't think they are. I think they are actually the ends of these finger things coming out that just got washed and left behind. So they're an erosional remnant, but I don't think they're water ripples. And you can just see how that's all been cut out like that. So you have flat bottom creek beds with steep cliffs, just like in Lake Missoula. You see that? We have Frenchman Coulee. We have Chugwater Creek. We have planation surfaces above. That planation surface above Chugwater Creek goes 32 miles until you almost get to Nebraska. Then it drops down there to another bottomland area. All right, take you up to the Beartooth Mountains, 10,000 feet. This is by Billings, Montana. The bottom of the Rock Creek is 7,000 feet. Look at the top of the Beartooth there. Isn't that interesting? Look how flat that is. No, it's not like something you want to, you think that you could just stand on and never roll. It's got roughs and stuff because it's done by water. But look at that planation surface, how flat the top of the mountain is right there. In fact, that has a little bit to do with one of the alleged names for the Beartooths, and we'll see that a little later. So in the Beartooth Mountains, we see planation surface even at the top. So that must have been when it's still coming out of the water, the mountains are getting planed down. So we see it just like that. Why is that there? Okay. And now we go to erosional remnants, buttes, and mesas. All right, erosional remnants. First off, we have to clarify that some of these are made by kind of volcanic action. And you've got to imagine that's a volcano coming up through soft material. It cools, and then the top gets eroded off with all the dirt. Notice how it's planed on the top. It has a slightly rounded, but it's flattened. And then all the rest of the dirt get washed away over the next 2 million years. or weeks, and probably weeks, almost certainly weeks. This is another butte like that. This is just across from Lincoln, Montana, down the pass, Rogers Pass, on Highway 200. And this is called Crown Butte. It is a sill butte where the lava came up and then went sideways and cooled. And so this is the top of that where it cooled. Notice the canyon that's been cut right in the bottom end of this thing. And what are you seeing on the top? Do you see water channels? Those are big water channels for a very small butte. Even if it was millions of years, how did they get so big? And they continue on past the edge of the butte. Do you see that? They're still wide. They're not narrow like the water just started. They're wide as if it was wider and then got cut off. Here's a side view of it. Isn't that interesting? That's just the magma, how it cooled. It cooled layers this way and also in columns. So it's really a strange looking place. And what I noticed about that is like there's little water channels coming down from here. Like they've got cut into the rock. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder how that happened. And so we have a flat top, we have a cliff, and then we have a 45-degree angle. Anybody heard that before? And we're hearing it again and again. But what's interesting, notice how the top tips away from the edge of the butte. And yet there's deep water channels on the edge of the butte, as if water just poured over there and cut these channels, yet the top goes the other direction. So where'd the water come from? Unless it was already up to that level or pouring off. Something happened there. Very interesting. There you can see the water coming down from the Rocky Mountains, cutting that channel there. And if you look carefully now, you're going to be able to see my truck, I believe. Oh, a black speck, barely visible. That's where I am. That's the neat thing about drones. You get a lot of exercise of your thumbs. And you get great photography. But look at the water channels cutting the side of that. And yet the surface goes away from the top. It flows away. So how in the world did enough water come off of that to cut those channels? And then the other thing that bothered me is these water channels are going the wrong direction. The water, if this is from Noah's flood, the water's coming off the Rockies going this way, and these water channels are going the other way on top of the butte. And I thought, all right, now I'm disturbed about that. What did I just discover? Because that doesn't fit Noah's flood. And notice how they kind of project off into the air. They're still pretty wide. Then I thought of this. This is an irrigation ditch right by my house. I'm throwing tennis balls. What's happening to them? What's that called when they reverse direction like that? An eddy. How many ever floated rivers? You know where the eddies are. You can pull your boat over without getting sucked in. When water comes out and expands, it'll go around and fill the gap, and it'll even go the opposite direction. Watch that one right there. It's going the opposite direction in which I threw it in. That's an eddy. Same thing happens when you throw a rock in the river. The water has to go around it. And if it's a big rock, the water's really going to come around it. And what direction is it going? The opposite direction. And then I started to think about that. I thought I was going to a camp in Lewistown, which is a couple hours away, and I kept thinking about that. I thought, that's an eddy. And we have water that's coming backwards. That's what's got to be that. And then later I found this one. This is Cascade Butte, about 15 miles away. And I look up on the top of that. Do you see something now? What do you see on the edge there? You see it? There's water channels. And that's what they look like from the side. Remember how I said they're too wide to have been cut right there? This is a hanging canyon. Oops, back up. It's a hanging canyon, but it's the bottom end. You see that? And it got cut off up here and left the bottom end hanging. Make sense? Can you get that? Can you visualize that? All right, I'm going to take you back to the Beartooth now. First off, I want to show off the Beartooth. Isn't this cool? Do you know that you cannot fly a drone from within wilderness area? But in a national park, you can fly it from outside the wilderness into the wilderness. I confirmed that. So I flew over this. It's just gorgeous country. It's all granite any sedimentary rock that was there has been washed off and removed by either the water of the rising mountains or by the glaciers that followed. And it's quite interesting to look at. And see, that's where I think it gets the name the Beartooth. You see how flat that is? Kind of like teeth hanging up there. That's one of the theories. This is Beartooth Butte. All of the other area is granite. And this is dirt, sedimentary rock stuck on top. Look at the shape of that. You see the spine? And then it spreads out, and you can see the water spreading out, leaving this fossil-laden sedimentary rock behind. And then there was also some that kind of went down the middle, but then it's apparently left that and went to the sides and cut that out on the sides. And this is also quite flat. And you can see the angles, and I'm watching my time, see how much we can get through here. You see the cliffs, you see the shoulders, same angles that we see everywhere else. There's one, and there's a couple more things I want to show you if we can try to cut our time. As we go back at it, you're going to see an iron-laden section. Here it is. But you'll also see some little towers hanging out there. Let's see if I can show them to you. Right here. You see that? How many millions of years do you think that would last? That's evidence this is not very long ago that this was left there. And then notice how flat it is up on top. That was flat up there. And I think we can see that little tower again. Right? It's right in here. I don't know if we'll be able to visualize it or not. Oh, there it is. There it is. That thing couldn't last millions of years. And you see these all over the place. You see them everywhere. Okay, we better move on. So we have, then it's called Beartooth Butte on one side and Beartooth Butte and Clay Butte. It's the same structure. Strong evidence of water rushing off the rising Beartooth mountain range. We're at 10,000 feet, so what lake dam broke above that? There isn't any. It's massive erosion leaving behind fossil-containing sedimentary rock at the top of the mountain. Where did the water come from at this elevation? Where did it come from? Psalm 104:8. The mountains rose and the valleys sank to the place you appointed them. I think contextually this is the flood. That text is speaking to that. All right. Show you something. This is brand new. Look at this thing. This is 1,600 feet high from ground to up the top of this thing. 1,600 feet. Do you think this is left by water? Do you see the water flowing around it? I also find when you find a high part and then a lower part, the high part is from where the water came from. I don't know why. But it's 1,600 feet above the floor down below. That is one wild-looking place, isn't it? And it's in the middle of nowhere in Utah. I was out there doing some aviation instruction, and one day was too windy, and so I said, I got to go out there and fly that. Oh, no. It's not, is it showing it? No, it's not showing it. What's the matter? Well, what it's supposed to, down below, you can see. There we go. So here is Lake Missoula flood, and here is, let's see if I can get that to go again, and here is Factory Butte. Lake Missoula flood, notice the spine, and the narrow and the cliffs. Notice the spine, the cliffs, and then it goes at an angle. Spine, cliffs, this is Lake Missoula, and here's Factory Butte. And by the way, this is interesting because I went out there and I only had this one day to do it, and the winds were 25 mile an hour sustained, 40 mile an hour gusts, and I flew my drone kept saying, beep, now get me home, get me home. Dust is flying in my face. Look at how good of videos it gave us, though. So there's the two, Lake Missoula and Factory Butte. How did Factory Butte get there, folks? That's a flood, but that's a big flood. That is way bigger than anything we have seen. Even Lake Missoula is child's play. Those cliffs are 600 feet. These are 1,600 feet high. And you're looking down on it, it's just like frightening as all get out. Just to fly along. Notice it's sort of flat on top. Isn't that interesting? That was planed down at that level. All right, I'm going to take you to Hurricane Mesa. Now, you might want to say hurricane, but the locals is Hurricane, okay? That's called Monkey Butte or Hurricane Butte. It's called Monkey Butte because in the 1950s, they were trying to develop ways to get people to eject out of jet airplanes during a fight and survive. So they strapped monkeys into this thing, shot them at supersonic speeds, and then flipped them off the cliff and see if they'd make it. That's how it got named Monkey Butte. Notice there's another mesa level above this. Another mesa level. Look how flat that is. That's been planed down. This is what's interesting. I caught this by accident. Nobody goes into this area. What do you see? You see water levels dropping. Do you see that? It's rushing through, drops, rushes through, drops, rushes through, drops. Not being formed today. Nothing like that's being formed today. And you can see that was dramatic. That was one of those things we went, look at that. Couldn't believe what we were seeing because I wanted to see Monkey Butte. I wanted to fly up there. This is more significant because look at that evidence of dropping water. We see evidence of dropping water levels during a massive flooding event. All right, Moab, Utah. I'm probably past time. You guys want me to continue or quit? All right, we'll go up here. Now, there's cliffs there. They're about 600 feet high. I didn't know what was up there. I just thought I'd fly it and see what's up there. That's what I do. And I was camping. There's Moab, and I was camping up the river. That's the Colorado River right about there. And I just put my bird up, and I wanted to see what's up there. And this is what I found. Look at those water channels pointing right to the LaSalle Mountains. As if the mountains are rising up, the cliff Moab wasn't there. It was coming straight off of the LaSalles. And on Google Earth, I can see them. They're there. But I went farther back, and there's another level of those fins from the Abajo Mountains to the south. And they merge, and it curves and joins them. The fins are left there. Now I went out to Needles Overlook. It's quite a jaunt out there, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So I was out there, and there was snow on the ground, and it was muddy and nasty. But I was flying along. Now we're 1,000 feet below where I was before, maybe 2,000. Look what I see. On the bottom, water fins pointing to the Abajo Mountains. We had water fins up there, and then it cuts down, and now we have water fins down below. And I just call them water fins. I don't know what else to call them. There's probably some better name. So what we see, water fins give us strong evidence of directional flow from rising mountain ranges. We're out of time, but I got to tell you this one. All right. Google Earth. What do you see there? What's the green thing? Farthest east portion of the Rocky Mountains. You know what that is. Yeah. And what's the white thing? Black Hills? White thing? Badlands? Look below. What do you see down there? We'll see. We'll come back. See the white thing? That's the Badlands of South Dakota. Now, they're not like the North Dakota Badlands. They are weird. They're just like somebody just made castles, but then it's flat. Do you see that? It's like somebody made these castles, and then you have flatlands below. I often depict it as if somebody dumped a bunch of mud there and then cut it all up and made some sculptures on it. I think somebody did. Somebody a little bigger than us. But look at that. It's just a strange looking place. And here, that's where you tee off. And there's a big sand hazard out there. And then you're green. You can see it. I'm just kidding. Some of you are going, really? No. It just happened to be a green year. And you could see the grass growing on the very flat top of this thing. And you can see now it drops down to another level. And then that's flat. And then it drops down and it channelized that all apart. And it just cut it up. This is on the edge of the national park because I can't fly into the national park. That's my disclaimer. National park is about a mile that way. Or maybe half a mile. So there we go. That's the Badlands of South Dakota. Water ripples. Do we see those? There, you see the Badlands? What do you see below them? You see them? This is Google Earth, guys. This is not 45-foot high ripples. These are a couple of miles across because I worked in the sandhills while I was in high school and put up hay. Look at, you can see the direction of flow. Do you see the arrows on the right and left? There's a slight change in direction, particularly this one. And what if we went backwards and saw what's in the way? What is in the way? The Black Hills. And when you have the Black Hills rising up, what's it going to be like? A rock in the river, right? And if it's a rock in the river, the water is going to start to eddy back. It's going to start dropping the sand and load first. And as it eddies up closer to the Black Hills, it's going to drop the finer materials, the mud. Oh, my goodness. My hypothesis is that the sand hills were made by the Black Hills in an eddy back situation. And then as the water flowed, it left us the sandhill water ripples right there, pointing the direction of flow. Here's the ones in Camas Prairie. That's what it looks like from Google Earth, much closer. And then this is what this looks like, the sandhills of Nebraska. We just have a ton of sand just dropped on a third of the state, just on top of the surface. That's the best answer I can come up with. By the way, you can tell whether you're in water or whether you're in wind, because wind, when it blows the sand up, it drops to about a 30 to 35 degree angle. Very dangerous when you're running your motorcycles up and then you go down. It can be quite dangerous. Water, it goes up to about a 24 degree angle. The steepest angle on the sandhills is 25 degrees. Has to be water. Has to be water. So that's how I believe that is. The sandhills in Nebraska, the water is eddying back, dropping its load, and then later it's getting cut. Pothole lakes, gotta get you this. Oh my gosh, I'm going long. Oh well, Mike's being gentle. This is pretty cool. This is Big Mesa, 700 feet from bottom to top. What do I look at? When I look down, what are you seeing? Nobody else sees it, but you see it now. What are you seeing? Hundreds of pothole lakes. Hundreds of pothole lakes on the edge of a mesa, which is an erosional remnant, and on the edge of it you find pothole lakes. 700 feet above the desert floor. Wow. Wow, look at those things. And you can see how that came in and came out, swirled. All of those pothole lakes, they're clearly pothole lake. They have the angular base to them, everything like that. And so you can see there's the pothole lakes on the edge of Lake Missoula. And then these are even bigger, more common. Those are big, but these are more common and plentiful than I see in Lake Missoula. All right, cones and towers. Chimney Rock, Nebraska. I like to call it my clock tower because it's a timepiece. The timepiece. Notice the dimensions, right? You see the dimensions, and I call it my clock tower because of the top. And why I call it clock tower is that right there, you see the cracks? This is soft sedimentary dirt. And it lost 40 feet in the last 150 years. And so here's a picture of it, and it's 30 feet higher 150 years ago. Okay? Here's Utah on the edge of Zion. First off, Jim was with me, and he says, "Hey, Kevin, film that. Those rocks are so pretty." Well, okay. But it turned out to be a bonanza. Are you playing? There she goes. Look at how beautiful that is, right? Just you can see flood all over this. It's really cool, but what's on top was shocking. Shocking. I didn't expect to find this up on top. What are you starting to see? You see a cone shape? Let me show you some more of them. On the edge of these mesas are these cone fields by Zion National Park. Not in the park, on the edge. Just my disclaimer. I don't want to lose my license. And so I'm flying up here and just looking at these cones. And they have to be some turbulent whirlpools zipping all over. How else do we explain those? And you see the sedimentary rock, it looks like coins stacked on top of each other. And it's just like perfect little cones. Look at that little guy. And these just look like cones all on top of each other. Astonishing. And then as I flew on top, what do I see? Oh my goodness, now I know it's turbulent whirlpools. The turbulent whirlpools cut us a pothole lake and then cut us cones and then cut us these channels that have the 45-degree angle banks. This, on top of this ridge, was all cut by turbulent whirlpools going crazy up there. Going crazy up there. Caused by turbulent whirlpools. All right, Sentinel Butte I don't have time for. Let's see. Now we'll have to skip this. One thing though, you notice Sentinel Butte. Let's do this. There's Interstate 94, and then there's the town of Sentinel Butte, and here's Sentinel Butte off of Montana borders, what, 8 miles away, 10 miles away? And there's a cone field. I got to show you that. So here it is. And it's parallel on both sides of the butte. One on the north side, right along the interstate. The other one's on the south side. The north side one is more profound. Isn't that something? How many of you have noticed cones out along the roads out here? Yeah, you see them. You have an idea now how that happened. So we see these cone fields. I'm going to do this because we're going late. I'm just going to do it. So I grew up here, right? And I noticed all of the rivers end right at the edge of the Little Missouri River, right there. Notice all the rivers, the blue rivers, Heart River, the Knife River, Heart River, Drainage, and Green River are all going this way. And then, oh, that's the wrong button. There we go. And so they're going that direction. And then we have the Little Missouri cutting the Badlands going that way, and then we have these going down into the Yellowstone drainage. And I realized that early on, during the flood, the water, if we take that back directionally, the water is coming from, that's cutting our rivers, the Heart River, the Knife River, right here, through Dickinson and Belfield and South Heart. Those rivers came from Alberta and northern Montana as the mountains are rising up. That's the direction. If you go straight back, it goes right to those places. But then, as it starts to lower, the Missouri River starts to channelize and gathers all that water from Canada. And now what predominates is the Bighorns and the Black Hills. And that sends that through, and that cuts the Badlands. And it leaves the edge of those rivers hanging. They're like that. They're hanging rivers. And so here's Green River. Tell me how that thing cut this wide valley. Oh, we're out of time. I'm going to quit real quick, but I have to show you this. See how big and wide that is? How did that small waterway cut that huge valley? It goes all the way over to the Davis Buttes, if you know Dickinson area. And there's a roughened kind of beauty area there. It's there. And you see the Davis Buttes just coming into view right now. The Air Force Base was up on that middle, or that one, the larger circle there. That was cut, I believe, by the water flowing from Alberta, and then it got cut off. It got cut off and left these hanging like that. And so it's like this. And here's a picture we took on our field trip. Notice here the water is running east, north, east, southeast. This water is running south, or north, running north. And it stops right at the edge. It's left hanging. It's not this way, it's this way. It got cut off and it's leaving it. That tells us this was flood origin. It's a hanging canyon, the bottom end of it's hanging. And so we see buttes, we know how that came from. I'm not going to go through the Kildare Mountains, but they're basically a butte. I have to give you a final test though. Here we are. Arches. See this. I know, I'm 10 minutes over. What do you see now? What do you see? Everybody's walking around it. Nobody sees this. You have to walk around. That's 40 feet down there, 50 feet down to that thing, and you have a pothole lake that swirled around and cut an exit hole. I took this with my cell phone just so you know I couldn't fly my drone in a national park. But you see that? You have that angular, it's clearly a water swirl that cut that. And that's probably part of what was the force that left the arch there. And by the way, as we swing around, look at that. Look past the arch now, a little bit down to the corner. What do you see? Right there. See it? You have a cone. In fact, as you swing up that big pothole lake, what's not a lake because it cut an exit out of it, we see cones above it. And this is on top of a ridge, and it drops down hundreds of feet. I don't know how far, but I know this, that this family coming up here, we're real careful. Don't go any farther. And that lady standing out there, if she took 5 feet the other way, she'd be dead. You just go sheer off. Here's what it looks like from a distance. There's Delicate Arch. There's the Whirlpool Lake. There's a whole bunch of cones. How did this get formed? Water had to be doing that at that level. Water. All right, final test. Monument Valley. I'm sorry I'm real late. What do you see? You seeing it? All the things we've learned. All the things we've learned. There's Lake Missoula flood, and there's even Palouse Falls. You now know. Now here's the question. If that's the case, where did all the dirt go from that? Where did it go? It went to the Sea Cortez. And that's what we had, that mile out there of sand. It went to the Sea Cortez. BioLogos says there's no evidence of a global flood. I say, I don't think so. All over the place. Thank you, everybody. Sorry I went so late.